I'm pretty sure that most of you by now have already noticed that I am not Chinese. So, let me explain how I came to do this. 30 years ago, I married into a Chinese family. Straight from China, not Chinese American. My in-laws barely spoke English. We had an American wedding ceremony and a Chinese ceremony. The only thing I remember from the Chinese wedding ceremony was all my in-laws yelling at me to bow lower. But my poor mother-in-law, because I actually didn't learn for a few years how incredibly tolerant she was. You know, for anyone who knows something about Asian culture, at least for women in her generation, the epitome of a woman's life was to become a mother-in-law, because then you had a daughter-in-law to boss around, a daughter-in-law to be the slave. And so this poor woman gets this white girl from Chicago who doesn't know the rules, you know, and we would go to these fancy banquets with other people in the community, other Chinese families, and I would literally see adult children hand-feeding their parents with the chopsticks. And I remember saying to my husband, did they have a stroke? Can't they eat for themselves? And no, it was just that kind of honoring of the parents by actually feeding them. There was a huge learning curve for me to learn how to be in a Chinese family. And it actually was an amazing lesson for me about the value of family and community that most white cultures don't know. What I found a couple of years later was how incredibly tolerant my mother-in-law was, because I don't have a lucky face. And yet she still let me marry her son, so I'm very grateful. You know, traditional historical Chinese face reading was very much based on issues of good luck and bad luck. And I remember because my mother-in-law knew face reading, she was the first person who started to teach me. And I remember her saying to me, you know, things like, don't do business with that man. You know, you've got pig eyes. Or she's never going to get married because of her, you know, lion nose or something. And, you know, I just thought, that is just horrible. How awful to judge someone based on their appearance and to reject them. You know, if you're born with a certain kind of nose, is that it for you? You're never going to get married? No one's going to hire you for a job? That's crazy. I really thought it was superstitious folklore. It really wasn't until a few years later, when I started studying the deeper principles of face reading, that I learned what my mother-in-law didn't know. She just knew these rules, these rather superficial rules about what was lucky, what was good, what was bad. But actually, face reading is a branch of Chinese medicine, which is thousands of years old. And it evolved within Chinese medicine over the generations. Chinese medicine evolved in a very different way from Western medicine, both equally valid. So Western medicine, you know, double-blind studies, and if you go to a Western doctor, he's going to do blood tests and scans and all these other things. Chinese medicine evolved in a more organic, natural way, and basically they diagnose by observation. They're observing everything about you. You know, it's the original, it's the very first holistic medicine. And they look for patterns, identifiable patterns that give them information. So as Chinese medicine evolved, I call it, you know, 3,000 years of research and development, what they began to notice was there were patterns on the face, patterns of features, patterns of markings, wrinkles, that were predictive of certain kinds of illnesses, certain kinds of physical tendencies for the body to behave in a way. And out of this came Chinese facial diagnosis, where there are still doctors in China today who can diagnose simply by looking at your face and not even taking your pulse or anything else. But as they then went on with this work, what they began to realize was these same patterns on the face correlated to certain personality types. There were certain ways that people were predictable to think and feel and behave. There were certain things that you could see that they would naturally have a talent for, naturally be inclined to be good at, and other things that would challenge them. You could see what relationships would be good for them and what would be challenging, what their difficulties would be. The face is really considered to be a blueprint of who you are inside. You know, basically what Chinese medicine and Chinese face reading teaches is that we all kind of arrive with a soul's intent, I call it, with an inner design. It's really truly an inner blueprint. You know, and if you think about blueprints, if you're building a house and you build it according to the blueprint, the house will be sturdy, it will function well, it will stand for a long time. If you know your inner blueprint, then you can design a life based on that blueprint that will bring you happiness, that will help you discover the work that brings you joy, the people who will love you. You will have the least amount of stress because really you're going in alignment with who you were meant to be. So we all come in with that inner design all bright and shiny. And what happens to us soon after birth, at least in my experience with other people, is that almost immediately we start receiving expectations from family, judgments about who we're supposed to be. We're told we shouldn't feel a certain way, we shouldn't say that, or we shouldn't think this. You know, we just got to this planet, we don't know. So if someone says you're not supposed to feel like that, well, it can be a little bit crazy making because we really do feel like that. But we often try to just follow the rules that, okay, I'm not supposed to feel like that, so we stifle it, we deny it, we suppress it. I'm not supposed to think like this, I'm supposed to be like this. So what I find in life is that instead of living in alignment with your inner design, most of us, by the time we're teenagers, kind of have that negative talk radio station playing in our heads about everything that's wrong with us. We think that if only we could, fix it or change it, then everything would be fine and we'd be happy. But for me, that's, it's like understanding that you were born with short legs, that's part of your design. If you were born with curly hair, that's part of your design. You wouldn't think that you would have to go get surgery to fix your short legs, change your curly hair, although some of us try. It's about being yourself on purpose, successfully, without blame. Most of us go through life almost blaming ourselves for who we are, or blaming other people for who they are as well. So what I found with face reading is it's a very liberating thing because you can look in the mirror and suddenly understand what each of your features is telling you about who you are, and suddenly learn to love your big nose, for instance, for the first time.